Okay, so I'm super excited. Welcome to the group. I'm excited because we're really growing our community and we really are becoming that global community from California to South Africa. And today we have a guest speaker who I've become acquainted with, and I will call her a friend because we've become more than just acquaintances, we're friends. And she has an awesome presentation she's going to share with you. We've always thought about work-life balance, but she's going to talk about more about how it's work-life integration. So these are coaching conversations. The purpose of these conversations is for you to continue to grow as a coach and develop as a coach, and an opportunity to sharpen the saw with a range of speakers from our faculty to people throughout the world that are joining us to make presentations. In January, we've got someone coming talking about coaching mind body. And so I think that will be interesting. So make sure you watch our website for upcoming workshops. And we're integrating what we already know into some of the new information that we're learning. And hopefully you walk away with, yes, you walk away with one new learning, something that you'll be able to use. So our format today, we started at 11 Eastern. We'll normally start at 10. But our format is for you to please post your question and answers in the Q&A in the chat, and then I can feed them back to Alexis. We'll answer them during the Q&A period. If your question isn't answered and we don't have time for it, we will post it at the website at Global IOC. So if something happens and we run out of time because we're so fascinated with what we're hearing, then just know that we will post them at Global IOC. And then finally, we're going to do the breakout closer to the end of the conversation. Then we'll bring you back, discuss the breakout question, and then we'll go into Q&A. But make sure you post your questions in Q&A so we can get them all answered. So let me tell you about Alexis. Alexis is a productivity, time management, and efficiency expert. She spent the first 15 years of her career managing operations and HR at several early stage startups where there was always a way to do more than people to do it. She also believes that work-life balance is essential for everyone, and even though the definition may be different for everyone. As a result, Alexis has developed and implemented productivity systems in her company she worked for, in her life, and to ensure that goals were met, balls were not dropped, and then most importantly, she and those around her stayed sane. So sanity, big point today, okay? Alexis's productivity and time management systems, techniques, and tricks and hacks can be customized to any team or individual. Her aim is to help you do all that you want to do with less effort and less stress. She's SPHR and SHRM SCP certified. With that, Alexis, I'm turning it over to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here to talk to all of you today. And I really appreciate everyone showing up at different times, even though this might be the very beginning of your weekend. And I appreciate you, Peggy, for letting us do this at what is 8 a.m. for me in California and not 7 a.m. because that's a very difficult time for me with my kids and getting up and everything. So I appreciate all of that. I'm going to share my screen so that we can get started. Hold on just a second. And let's see, let's present here. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay. So we'll let technology go slowly for a minute there. Perfect. Okay. So as Peggy said, what we're going to talk about today, I use the term balance because everyone kind of knows what it means, but I also kind of hate the term balance because it's not real, right? There's nothing going to be in balance all the time. It's going to be different parts of the pie, and some are going to get larger at certain times and some are going to change. And so what we really want to talk about is how do we integrate work and life? Because that's the position that we're all in most of the time, and especially now with COVID, now that most of us are working from our homes and we're not allowed to leave very often either. And so I want to talk about different strategies that we can use for ourselves and also, in our coaching with other people to help people get to a point where they're not so stressed about what is going on and able to really have a separation between work and home in a way that feels good to them. So as Peggy mentioned, I won't go too deep into this because she read a nice bio for me, but I have been working around issues of time management, productivity, systems, efficiency, basically all the back end running stuff of a business, and all the people sides of a business put together for the last 20 years or so. And I started my practice around time management and productivity just about 3 years ago now. So I've been doing it full time since then, even though I've been doing this work forever, it seems like. But I would like to hear from you guys as well. So, what are you hoping to get out of today's webinar? If you want to throw some comments up in the chat, I always find that useful because then I can make sure that I give you examples that are relevant to what you're hoping to get out of today. And also that if there's anything you surface that wasn't part of the presentation, we can make sure to, talk about that in the Q&A. So if you have, an idea of what you thought today was going to be about, go ahead and throw it up into the chat. And if you don't have any comments there, then that's no problem either. Great, I see something around energy management. Tangible tools for how to integrate, great. I always call myself a tactical practical coach. And so I really go for the tangible. Energy management, we will be not talking about that deeply, but we can certainly talk about that in Q&A. Keeping the team engaged, certainly. Emotional replenishment, okay. Avoiding burnout, definitely going to talk about that. Boundaries, 100%. Managing time better, yes. Ideas for how to institutionalize for people who have working from home still, great. Perfect. Meeting time demands and managing our time, great. So I think the two things from here that we're not going to dive into deeply are around emotional replenishment and energy management, but we can make sure to talk about that in Q&A as well, because those are things that come up quite frequently, right? Perfect. Well, thank you all for being so participatory in the chat. I love that. I don't even have to sit here in awkward silence for a moment while we're waiting for people. Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to be covering today in this webinar is going to be 5 things. We're going to talk about how to set boundaries, or reset boundaries rather, because our boundaries have been completely obliterated and now we have to work a little bit harder to bring them back. How to reduce distractions, because we have very different distractions at home than we might have had in the office, etc. How to talk about sharing the load from both a home perspective and a work perspective, because there's a lot going on in both places. The formula for kind of continual improvement. So how do we make our situation incrementally better every day, even though things are very hard? And then how do we think about moving forward? So when we can come out of the current situation where we are, how do we think about, what do we want to bring with us and what don't we when we come out of this? All right. So first, let's talk about boundaries. As I mentioned, our boundaries, and as you've probably seen, have been just completely destroyed, right? We are all working and living in the same place all the time now. We don't have any of the rituals we used to have, like maybe going out for a morning coffee or, just our commute, which we used to really hate our commutes, but they brought some sort of boundary between work and home. And so we need to think about how do we recreate some boundaries in time first, and then we'll talk about how do we recreate some boundaries in space as well. So when we think about recreating boundaries in time to help us have healthier integration of our work and life, there's a few tactical things we can try. So the first one is that we want to do some of our most important work before we check messages, because what often happens, right? We roll out of bed, or maybe we just roll over in bed, we grab our phone off of our bedside table, we start scrolling, we're looking at our email, we're looking at messages, etc. And then we can't stop thinking about that, right? Even if we decide not to answer those messages right now and to wait until later, that's the first thing we do when we get to our computer, because we're social people and we are compelled to answer people. But what happens is that puts us immediately into reactive mode. So instead of taking care of whatever our priorities are for the day, we get into this reactive mode where we just start responding, right? And, I call this kind of letting the day happen to you, right? Where it's, you sit down at your computer with the best of intentions, all of a sudden it's 5 p.m. and you're wondering like, what happened? Where did the time go? I wasn't messing around. I was actually doing work, but yet nothing got crossed off of my list. How did this happen? And it's often because we just stayed in this reactive mode. We took what came and we worked on that. And so one really practical tip is to just spend the first non-meeting hour of your workday. So whatever that first hour of your workday where you're not in a client session, you're not in a meeting, whatever it is, and do whatever the most important thing is for your day before and during that time. Now, I'm not saying wake up early because I'm a person that cannot wake up early, but don't wake up any earlier. But just say, if you have sessions that start at 10 a.m. and your workday starts at 9 a.m., then take that 9 to 10 a.m. hour to do whatever the most important thing you need to do that day is. And then you can check messages and such after that. This will really help to avoid that downward slide into what happened. And the other thing that I will say about that is that people are often scared to do this because it feels like, well, how can I not know what's going on? I need to immediately know what's going on. But what I have found in my work with other people and in my life particularly is that whether you answer an email or a Slack message or a WhatsApp message at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. does not make a difference to anybody else. They don't even notice the fact that you have answered it at 10 a.m. versus 9 a.m. And so it's actually not typically that big of a deal as we think. Another thing that we can do is to put a boundary around the end of our day. And so to pick a stopping time each day. And this can be hard when we're at home because it just can feel like, well, what's the difference whether I, do some work at 11 p.m. or do some work at 5? Why does it matter? Every day seems like the next, right? But putting a stopping time each day can be a really effective boundary in time. And I don't mean needs to be the same time every day. It doesn't. But picking a time, in the morning to say, okay, I'm going to be done by 6 p.m. today. That's when I'm going to be done. And what this does is it helps us to apply Parkinson's law. And Parkinson's law is that work expands to fill the time allotted, right? So we know this, right? If we schedule a meeting for an hour, we're going to talk for an hour. If we schedule that same meeting for half an hour, the meeting's going to take half an hour, right? And so this is true of our work lives too. If we put a stopping point on it, then we are kind of racing against the clock a little bit. We are doing things more efficiently because we know that there's an endpoint, a specific endpoint. And it also helps us, in times like this, to have something to look forward to at the end of the day. Another thing that we can try around time is blocking our time. So using our calendars to more specifically say when we're going to do certain things. This can help us in a couple of ways. One, it can help us stay more on task and be a reminder of what we're supposed to be doing at any given time. But when working, in concert with other people, it can help others know where our boundaries are. So maybe we have young kids and they're home from, they're not in school and we need to from 11:15 to 12 every day, we need to be there for lunch and cooking for them. Block that off in our calendar so that people know that you're not available during those times. It's a good role modeling habit, right? To let other people know that you are a full human who has other things to do. Block off, if you cannot take meetings or calls between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., block that off on your calendar so that people know and they're not wondering, and that you can be a role model for others. And then also just the work that you're going to do. It's helpful to be able to see, from, of course, we have our calendars where we have our client sessions and we have our meetings with other people, but also what are we going to do in the in-between times? Because we often will just default to checking messaging if we don't know specifically what we're going to do then. And then another boundary that we can create is to recreate the transitions that we used to have. So creating rituals can help us to really feel that there is a difference between our home life and our work life. And so this could be a number of things, right? You could do a quick fake commute, right? You could come out of your house, put on some real clothes for a minute, go walk around the block, or, bring your coffee mug with you and just do a quick tour around. Some people even just literally leave their house and come back, right? Just getting up and then coming back. Another thing you can do is, at the end of the day, what is your ritual going to be? For me, I typically go on a run. That's the end of my workday. That works for me. It helps clear my head. It could also be you listen to your favorite podcast as a transition between home and work, or you go out into your garden or whatever it is. But having something that marks the end of the day, that is a ritual for you, can help you to really feel that separation so it doesn't feel like it's just an endless slog. Then we think about boundaries in space. So we have boundaries in time, and then how do we recreate those boundaries in space? And so the first one is really to just pick a dedicated workspace, whatever that is in your home. Now, maybe you are lucky enough to have a home office, and that's fantastic. You already have a dedicated space. What about the other members of your household? Do they have dedicated workspaces as well? This is something that certainly came up for us. You know, I have a couple of young kids, and at the beginning of the pandemic, I went from working at home by myself, because I had always worked from home for the last 7 years, to working at home with 2 school-age children and my husband also working at home. And one of the first things that we did was to designate a space for each person, and that was their workspace. Everyone else knew that, so that we knew not to bother them in that space. It doesn't have to be a whole separate room, because sometimes that's not, you know, available. One of my kids, his space was the dining room table, and that's where he was. And we knew that if we were to come into the dining room, we needed to be quiet because he was doing his schoolwork in there. What this does is, one, give people some ownership around their space, so they're not feeling like there's a, you know, that they're in the middle of everything. But also what it does is it allows you to reconnect to that psychological space of, I'm coming to this place to work. This is where I go when I work or when I do school, etc. This is another reason that we don't want to work in the bedroom, right? If we can possibly avoid it, we want to try not working in the bedroom, because that's not a space where we think about work. And also it can make our sleep worse, and our anxiety a little bit higher when we mix work in the bedroom. So if we can avoid it, we don't want to do that. But even just a spot on the couch, right? A spot that you go that you know that's the work spot, and that at the end of the day, you put those things away. We want to stick to our zone as well. So we want to make sure that it's consistent, so that we, one, our stuff doesn't kind of creep out into everywhere, and it feels like a contained office space. And then lastly, we want to close up shop at the end of the day. So what does this mean? It means if you have a door to your office, shut that door when you're done for the day. Like, make it physical that you're not working anymore. If your workspace is a spot on the couch, you want to take your laptop, put it in a box, slide it under the couch, you know, put it in a cabinet, whatever it is, you want to move that away at the end of the day, so that you have a real separation. Now, if you have one laptop and you're using it for home and for work stuff, and you don't want to put it away because you might be watching Netflix on it later, then have 2 profiles on your laptop, right? Have one for work and one for personal stuff, so that you don't accidentally get pulled into work-related emails when you're trying to relax, right? We have to be a little bit more mindful about these things now than we used to be, because we used to have boundaries that just existed for us within the world. All right. So another really great technique for both time management, task management, and also to create boundaries is to do what I call a little bit of end of day planning. Now, if they plan at all, they are doing it in the morning, right? You sit down, you grab your coffee, you grab your laptop, you look at your task list, you look at your calendar, you look at your email, you make a rough plan for the day, right? And this is great. Any kind of planning is great. I support any kind of planning. But what is far better is to plan the day before. So at the end of your workday, whenever that is, you want to spend 10 minutes or so, and you want to make a plan for tomorrow. And what this does is twofold. So one, it makes it so that your brain can actually take the work stuff, wrap it up in a bow, put it in a box, and stop thinking about it, so that you're not at the dinner table with your family spinning about all the things you still need to do, or so that you're not, waking up at 4 a.m. thinking, oh my God, I didn't do this thing yet, right? We're actually putting a plan around it. The other thing it does is it helps remove the need for activation energy, motivation, all of that stuff, willpower that we look for the next morning to just get going, because we have an easy executable list, right? We've already decided what to do in advance. We've separated the planning from the doing. So we just start tomorrow and we just start executing from the list without requiring a lot of that activation energy. Now, how do you actually do this? So it doesn't take a lot of time, but one thing you want to do is actually put it on your calendar. You want to schedule it on your calendar, because we're used to showing up for things that are on our calendar. And I know it may seem silly, but seriously, if you want to do this, put it on your calendar, put a recurring appointment on. You don't have to do it at the same time every day. You can drag it up and down depending on what your day looks like, but put it on there. And then when you're doing this planning, you just want to do a couple of things. So first, you want to do a brain dump. And a brain dump is literally just anything that's going on in your mind about work, get it out into, a pen and paper or your computer or wherever you store your tasks, right? Just get it all out. Just sit there for 2 minutes and be like, what am I thinking about? What else, what do I have on my mind that isn't in another place yet? What are open questions I'm thinking about? What are things I need to respond to? What are tasks I need to do, et cetera? Just do a quick brain dump. Then you want to check your calendar and you want to look at your task list in tandem, right? You want to look at your calendar and your task list and you want to see, what am I planning to do tomorrow? Usually we have a task list that has hundreds of items on it, right? Way more than we can do in any given day. And so we want to make an actual realistic plan for the next day. Given the time that we have, what are we going to do? And this may be different every day. So, for me, sometimes I'll have back-to-back clients for 8 hours. I'll just have back-to-back client sessions. On those days, I don't assign myself anything to do because on those days, at best, I'm going to be able to get to my email. On days where I might have a few hours that I'm not in client sessions, like maybe I have 3 hours, then I might be, building a workshop for a client or something that's going to take a little bit deeper work. On days where I've got kind of an hour or half an hour between meetings, I'm going to assign myself the things that don't require as much deep work, but still need to get done, the administrative work. So you're really thinking about the time you have available and what you have to do and making a actually realistic plan for the next day. I believe in this concept that I call task realism, which is basically this. Would you rather if you have time to do 10 things tomorrow, would you rather have 20 things on your list and get 10 done, or have 10 things on your list and get 10 done? In the end, it's the same amount of stuff that you got done. You still got 10 things done. But in one case, you feel bad about the 10 things you didn't do. And in the other case, you feel great about what you accomplished, right? So making a realistic plan can really help us, not only to get things done, but also to feel good about what we've accomplished. Now I'm going to switch to minimizing distractions, right? So this is a really big issue. There was a study done out of UC Irvine several years ago. And this study showed that not only are we distracted every 11 minutes, and I'm willing to bet it's more now, right? That it takes us on average 23 minutes, not seconds, 23 minutes to recover from every interruption or distraction. And this is huge, right? What this means is that recovering from distractions is a Sisyphusian effort. Every time we roll that ball a little bit farther, we get interrupted, right? We are getting interrupted before we've had a chance to recover from the last distraction. And so what this means for most people is that they spend about a third of the workday simply recovering from distractions. And that's why it's really important to be mindful of what distracts you. So to know what, each person is different. So different things are going to distract you. Distractions typically come from three buckets: from ourselves, our own thoughts, when we are working on something and we just decide to go check email in the middle of it. They come from other people. So it used to be our coworker who didn't have an inside voice. And now it's, our kids and our dog and our cat that's like trying to walk on our computer and all these things, right? And then technology. And technology is wonderful, amazing. I mean, it is the way that we are globally able to all talk to each other right now. And it is also designed to pull your focus at every single moment. And so we have to be mindful about these things so that we can set up the default settings differently, right? We can change them. So a few things that can help you to reduce distractions so that you can gain back some of your day. First one is use schedules, use visual schedules. So again, your calendar is your friend, but for your family and the people that you live with, maybe you have roommates, maybe you have a family, maybe you have kids, maybe you have, maybe we have elderly parents living with us, who knows? We've all got a lot of people going on in our houses, and some of us live alone, and so maybe this is less relevant, right? But if you live with other people, putting a visual schedule up of what you've got going on that day is really valuable. Even just printing out your calendar, or, I make a spreadsheet because I'm a huge nerd. I make a spreadsheet every week and I put it up on the door of the office to show my kids when I'm in meetings and when I'm not. So they know when they can come in and when they can't. I knew this was working at the beginning of the pandemic when outside of my office door, I heard my kids whispering to each other saying, "It says she's in a meeting, don't knock." And I was like, yes, it's working. But this works, with other adults too. It doesn't have to be a full schedule. You can put a post-it on the back of your laptop that says, "I'm in meetings until 4:30. As long as they see that before they see you and have a chance to interrupt you, that's great. If you've got little kids, or anyone has little kids, some people are having great success with a sign they hang on the door that is red on one side and green on the other, so that even toddlers can pick up on, this is a time that I can interrupt and this is not a time that I can interrupt. We also want to use our notifications really mindfully. So we know about all those pings and dings on our phones, right? And on our laptops. We want to think really carefully about that stuff. If you imagine every single email notification coming in as an interruption that's going to steal 23 minutes from you, then you might find this a little easier to do. And so I really recommend turning off all the notifications for definitely all social media, all games and things like that on our phones, but also for email and Slack and messaging, because we want to be able to be responsive to people on a time frame that works for us. So maybe we're checking and responding to email 3 times a day at intervals throughout the day, instead of the second an email comes in or the second a Slack message comes in. Because if you think about it, we're often worried to not be, we're not going to be responsive for people, right? But the reality is that we can still be responsive even if we're doing that in a more metered way on our own time. When you send somebody an email, you don't expect them to answer it within 30 seconds, right? Like when that is not typically our expectation when we send somebody an email, that we're going to get a response back in just a few minutes. Yet that's what we expect of ourselves, right? When other people send messages to us, we feel like we have to respond right away. And so, this is often a false expectation. And we want to remove those notifications so that we can more thoughtfully respond to our communications. I will say that in a remote world, calendar notifications are totally essential. These are probably the only the only notifications we want. And this is because we no longer have any sort of queue, right? Like we can't see anybody walking up to get to that meeting over in the other room. We don't have that anymore. And we can have a tendency to really dive into, what we're working on and then just lose track of time. And so meeting notifications, I think, are important, but all the other notifications, just try it. Try turning them off and see what happens. The point of all of this, right, is that, notifications, et cetera, is that it is so much easier to remove the temptation than it is to resist temptation, right? This is why we don't go to the grocery store hungry, right? This is why we don't keep donuts like right next to our desk. It's because it is easier to remove the temptation than it is to resist it. So hide your phone, put it behind, I like to keep mine face down behind my computer. So it's there if I need it, but I'm not seeing it, because studies show that if we even just see our phone, we have that tendency to pick it up and grab it, right? Studies show that if we have our phone face up, we grab it more often than if it's face down, right? So just put it somewhere, put it in a drawer, put it in your purse, put it in your backpack, put it behind your computer, just keep it out of your sight. We can also limit clickbait for ourselves, right? So, a lot of us will have our homepage for, when we show up on our browser as the news, or, something that is something that we might want to click on. We don't want that. We want our homepage of our browser to be the most boring thing possible, right? We want it to be Google, or, I love this Google Chrome extension called Momentum, which basically it's a free extension that gives you, every time you open a new tab, it just gives you a beautiful picture of nature. And in the middle, there's one slot where you can write what you're focused on. And so it's a subtle and gentle reminder. Every time you open a new browser tab, it'll be like, Alexis, you're supposed to be working on that presentation or whatever I've put in the morning, right? So it's, you tend to not go down that rabbit hole. And then we can also just clear clutter. So this is a simple one, but studies have shown that when we have physical or digital clutter around our workspace, or anywhere really, that our cortisol goes up. And when our cortisol goes up, we're in fight or flight mode, and we become more distractible by nature, right? And our cortisol is our stress hormone, it's our fight or flight hormone. So if we are feeling like we're getting distracted, or we're feeling a little stressed, or we're feeling like we can't focus, one easy thing we can do is just, you don't even have to put everything away. Just swipe everything off your desk and put it into a pile in the corner, right? Or put it in a drawer. You don't have to get everything in the right place. Just remove that clutter. Or if you're looking at the background of your laptop and there's just a million different icons all over the place, create a folder called To File, swipe everything and just put it in the To File folder, and you can get to it later. You don't need to deal with it now. It just helps to remove some of that clutter so that our brains can focus better. Right. Now I want to talk about kind of sharing the load of what's going on right now, because I think, when we integrate our work and our home lives, we are bringing our work home and we're bringing our home to work, and there's a lot going on in both locations, and lots of us are doing more work than we used to be doing. And so there's a methodology that I use, I used to use this and primarily with families, but I think it's something that we want to use at work now too, because people have very different circumstances. And it's something that you can share with your clients as well, is really just thinking about how do we take everything that's going on and figure out what's going to work going forward, because it might not be what used to work. And so what we want to do, both in a work environment and a home environment, is to catalog what there is, right? What needs to happen. So what are all the things that need to happen? What's the total workload look like? Get everything out, do a huge brain dump. Like what is the lay of the land, right? And then we want to say, like, have new things popped up? Are there new responsibilities that have popped up, like homeschooling our children or other things that may have happened that we didn't used to have to do, right? What are the new things that have popped up? Or at work, maybe there's new things that have popped up because we need to learn how to do things in a remote environment, right? We need to learn how to use all the features of Zoom that we didn't really have to before. There might be new things we want to do or learn, et cetera. So we want to take stock, basically. What's everything that needs to be done? And then we want to review who's doing these things now. Maybe it's nobody doing some of these things. Maybe we're doing too much. Maybe, somebody else, but just catalog it. Who's doing what, right? Who's doing these things now? And asking the questions of, does that make sense? Does it make sense for the people who are doing these things to be doing these things right now? Then you can redistribute, right? You can say, maybe it doesn't, right? Maybe we look at this list, maybe we're doing it in a family environment and we're looking at this list and we see, one person has 85% of the load. That doesn't make sense. Maybe we can switch some things around. Or maybe we say, you know what? I see that you are doing the dishes and I actually don't mind the dishes and I'm doing the laundry and I hate the laundry. Could we swap, right? Just a very simple explanation, right? Do we have children and could they be doing more things, right? What can we give for them to do to take some of the load off of us? Now, in a work environment, this is totally possible too. So we may have for our teams or for a group of people that we're working with, and for your clients, you may suggest them for their teams. What is going on at the department level? Like, what are all the things that need to be done? And who is doing them now? And does that still make sense in the current environment? Could roles and responsibilities be swapped to help people to better integrate whatever is going on in their lives? Maybe there were things that had to be done at certain times before that don't work anymore when you have kids at home, and that could be done by someone else. Like, where can we redistribute things? And then also, where can we delegate? Where can we outsource? Where are the places where things have to be done, but they don't necessarily have to be done by us? So really thinking about, from a global perspective, about here are all the things, who's doing them, and how can we switch that to make it work better for everyone? All right. Now, I also want to talk about this. I've been calling it my COVID formula, but really it's just a formula for continual improvement no matter what situation we're in. And I want to talk about this because it's something that can help not only with what we just talked about, but also with all of the little situations going on right now. It can help us to avoid burnout. It can help us to make sure that we're continually fulfilled in what we're doing. It can help us to manage the little things and the big things. And so the formula is this. We want to communicate. So we want to talk to people about what's working and what's not working. We want to normalize the fact that things might not be okay, because that is something that we often feel like we don't talk about this. We don't talk about these things because we don't want to talk about it unless it's a big deal. And then we wait for things to become a big deal. And then once they are a big deal, they're harder to change and harder to fix. So we want to be asking on a regular basis in our family and in our teams, for ourselves, what's working and what's not. And we want to be asking then, what can I do to try to fix what's not working? This, in my family, we ask these questions literally every day, right? What's working, what's not, how do we fix it? Then we want to experiment. And I really love the language of experimentation over the language of change, because people are often very resistant to change, as I'm sure you have experienced and know. But most people don't want to be the jerk who isn't willing to experiment, And so it is much easier to sort of get yourself and other people to experiment with things versus to change the way we're doing things. And an experiment makes more sense because when we try something new, we don't know if it's going to work or not. We're just trying it out and we're seeing if it can work. And so we want to talk about, when we talk about what's not working, we want to then come up with some experiments to try, some strategies to figure out what is not working and how can we address that. And then we want to come back, we want to iterate on those, right? Okay, we tried this, it didn't quite work. How do we need to tweak it? What do we need to do? Do we need to throw it out completely and come up with a new strategy? You know, how do we refine? And then we just repeat the whole thing. So we keep communicating, we keep talking about it, we keep experimenting. And in this way, we can both adapt to incredibly fast changing situations right now where it's like, we don't know if the schools are going to be open next week or they're not. But also we can incrementally get better over time. And so it works not only in the long run, but also in the short run to help us feel as though we have some agency around what's happening, even when it feels like we, you know, on the grand scale, we have no control. And so this formula can help, you know, it can be around our work, it can be around our family, it can be around really anything. And, you know, sometimes I call this agile for families, agile development for families. But we are going to do a breakout room around this concept. And so what we're going to do is get into some breakout rooms. I think Peggy's going to put you all in some breakout rooms. And we just want to surface some of these things. So hopefully this is a safe space where we can talk about, you know, what's working really well, because maybe we can share with each other strategies that are working well, and we can surface some best practices around, around integration. Maybe we can talk about what's not working well for us. Maybe somebody has some strategies we could try, or maybe we're just letting it out, and that's an okay place to be. And then what are some things we can try to fix? Like, what are some things that, you know, might be a good solution that we could experiment with, that we could try? And then we'll come back after that.
I just opened all rooms, so join the room that you've been assigned to. Oh, what did you talk about? What can you share with us so that we got good ideas for moving forward? I can see your names, by the way, so you better cough up your ideas, or I'll just start calling people.
And
I'll start for us. One of the things that was shared was Gretchen shared with us that she uses what's called best self.
You know it,
planner.
Peggy knew it.
Yeah, and that was actually really interesting. So I'm kind of calling her out, but Gretchen, I think it would be good for the group if you explained what that is.
So Peggy will laugh because we worked together years past, and I'm like, Peggy, you have to see this journal. And what they've actually created a planner since then, and it does a lot of, Alexis, it's kind of exactly what you were saying. I don't know if you've seen the best self or not, but it's a tool that I use to do what you described. And I was sharing that the weeks that I plan and I do zero-based scheduling, and I actually have my whole day planned out, I am probably 300 times more productive than the weeks when I don't. And that 20, I loved that stat you threw out, the 23 minutes to reorient myself, because that's me. And so what that does is that eliminates my 23 minutes of reorientation every time, because I come back from the next meeting, or I log in for the next meeting and I'm done, and I'm like, okay, I know I got to do this, so I get right to the next thing.
yeah.
That's awesome. Can I just add that Gretchen is sitting beside my old office, and I have envy of, oh my God, I used to be there.
Oh, you don't miss it. Who are you kidding?
Thanks for that, Gretchen, because that is, you know, I love that idea about being productive with a journal, like the process you're using. And two things that, Alexis, you said that I wanted to add was David Allen, in Getting Things Done, says, if we keep everything in our head, then we're so distracted that we can't do the thing that needs to be done because we're trying to remember everything we're doing. So I loved when you said write it down. And I also love the part about planning the night before, because Jack Canfield says that our subconscious works to solve the problems that are on that list. And so when you're in a shower and you get an idea, that's because overnight from that list, your subconscious was working on it. So both really good ideas to be focusing on. Who else wants to share?
Well, it's Carol. I can go. In our group, we had Wessel and Jennifer, and we all wanted to thank you, Alexis, in terms of the presentation. We've all said how it was great, and we appreciated the notifications, shutting off the notifications. Jennifer was saying that she's done it and it works. And I personally, when you were saying it, I got distracted and I actually went to shut off my notifications. So notifications worked. What we felt was challenging, and Jennifer and Wessel were a little bit different, but the challenge was the same, around expectations to respond immediately. Jennifer's in a situation where in a legal environment, you can't wait, whereas Wessel was more around clients. You want to be responsive to clients so, you know, if there's anything we can do to change the expectation, because it's around expectations, right?
Yeah.
And then as a solution, Wessel suggested maybe like, how do you delegate something? So as opposed to responding to yourself, responding to emails, if there was someone, if you were in a position where you can delegate responses, sort of give the high level points of here's how you respond to emails, then do that. So we had a great group and great discussion, and thank you.
Well, one thing that I want to mention, so thank you so much. I love that I love it when people take action already, like before the webinar is even over, right? But thinking about, I think that's a really valid point about some people are in roles where it makes it a little bit harder to not be as, to not respond immediately. And I think that you guys are so right about expectations. One thing that I find often works pretty well is to set those expectations at a, so like have in your email as your auto response, say, I check email 3 times a day. If this is urgent, here's my cell phone number. Or if this is urgent, here's the way to contact me. And I think, I often will do a workshop with teams about communication norms, because I think that, what you guys have unearthed in this conversation is that if you go around, if I asked every single one of you on this call, how quickly should you respond to an email? I would get 30 different answers, right? And this is the same, this is true of every single team. And so coming together and saying, like, what are the channels that we use? What communication channels do we use? Which ones do we use for which purposes? And what's our emergency channel, right? If I need to get to you in the next 2 seconds, how do I do that? What is that channel? Because I think a lot of times why we feel like we need to have the notifications on is because we aren't clear about the norms and the expectations on our team or with clients, et cetera. And I spent about 8 years in a outsourced HR role working with 150 different startups. So I understand the needs of clients who are like, hey, I'm going to terminate half my staff and I need all the paperwork in 2 hours. There's these types of things that come up. And so there are certainly different types of roles. And then there are some, it's like if you're, if you are a tech person and you are like the person in charge of the servers going down, well, you need to have notifications on for that, right? And there are certainly certain roles, or maybe we need to say, we'll have notifications on for our boss, but not for other people or whatever it is. So thank you for bringing that up.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Who else wants to share? One last person want to dig in and share what you talked about?
Well, can I do that? It's Pat.
Pat, you absolutely can.
Well, I was with Kirsten. I'm not sure if two makes up a group, but there was the 2 of us. I think we both saw ourselves as very good examples of the bad examples. Kirsten was slightly more of a work in progress. I saw myself in practically everything that one shouldn't do. 2 things. Kirsten was certainly finding that blocking her time was working. And I have found that doing the planning the night before is very good. But one thing we could agree on, and that was that these proposals of Alexis, they're all so simple and so practical that there's no excuse for not doing them. And it really has been very valuable.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Alexis, I'll turn it back to you. We have about 6 minutes left for the call.
Well, we've only got one more slide, so we're good. All right, we're on time. So the last thing I really want to leave you with before we just get to a couple of minutes of Q&A is how do we think about kind of emerging, whenever this happens, whenever we emerge back into the world, whatever the new world looks like after this period of COVID and all of this, I want to be thinking about, and this is actually a framework that I often use just for New Year planning and things like that, but keep, start, stop. And so what does this mean? It's like, what do we want to keep doing? What is working well that we want to keep doing? And we want to consciously keep doing it instead of doing it by happenstance, right? What's working well that we want to continue, that we want to make time for? And this might be, you know, a lot of people have said to me, well, this is the first time I've had family dinners with my family in a really long time during COVID because we can't go anywhere. And so maybe that's something that you love and is working really well and you want to make space for it, even when we can all go outside again, right? And then what do we want to start doing? So what have we been missing? What do we really want to make room for? What do we want to start doing? What are some new practices that we might want to experiment with? And then also, almost most importantly, what do we want to stop doing? What are the things you have been relieved to be missing over the last 6 or 7 months, right? And how do we not bring those things back in? Because I think that we're at, you know, kind of a critical point where we have been able to experience the world in a different way. Maybe it's been very hard, but what can we take out of this? And, you know, there's certain things for me that I have been very relieved to be missing that I want to make a conscious point of not bringing back. This is a framework that, that I tend to employ a lot with my clients at any point when they're feeling overwhelmed about things. Like how can we think about the things in your life in these buckets so that we can really identify where you want to be spending your time and is that in line with your goals and your values? And so I want to leave this framework with you because it's so simple and it's something that I think we can use to self-reflect on a pretty regular basis with a lot of effort, or sort of not very much effort. So I want to open it up to Q&A, and I know we just have a couple of minutes left. I also have my phone number, or sorry, my email there, because if you have a question and we don't have time to answer it in the next few minutes, you can feel free to email me as well. And then I also just have some free guides that I'll throw out there. Sometimes these are helpful for people. So I have a working parent survival guide for coronavirus, a 5-step plan to have an organized home workspace, and then a template to help you with that division of labor, whether it's for your home or for your work, sort of how do we catalog everything so that we can redistribute. So you're welcome to download any of those things if you would like to, but also if we just have a couple of minutes for questions, I'm happy to take any questions. And I really enjoyed talking to you all today. And I'm so thankful that Peggy, you brought me in to share in this conversation.
So what kinds of questions do you have? I'm not going to make you put them in chat, but if you have a question, please feel free to just raise your hand or jump in. Any questions?
Well, I'm just going to start talking then about one thing that we mentioned up in the beginning. And if anyone has a question, let me know. But somebody had mentioned, a couple of people mentioned like energy management and emotional management and things like that. And so I just want to touch on that for a second. I think this is super key. And I think one of the first things that we can do is to just have awareness around it. So if we can just track for a day or a couple of days, when are we feeling lethargic, right? When are we feeling like we have the best focus time? When are we feeling like, oh, we just can't go on or whatever it is? Like what patterns can we see so that then we can start to address those things? You know, if we see that like, hey, we are not really, our brain's not ready to go until like 9:30 in the morning. Well, that's probably not our best focus time, right? We should do the things like do our filing and our expenses and those things that don't require our full brain at that time, right? We want to kind of match our energy levels. Instead of trying to change so much, we just want to match our energy levels to the type of work that we're doing. So you want to think about when, you know, if you have a 2 p.m. slump every day, then you want to think about, okay, well, what can I do about that? Maybe I can get a snack and some coffee. Maybe I could take a little 20-minute nap during that time, or maybe I just do the work that doesn't require my full brain at 2 p.m., right? So really think about what your own energy patterns are, and then think about specific solutions for each of those different things.
Very much just self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yeah. I think awareness is the first step for anything, right?
Carol, did you have a question?
Oh my God, you know me so well. Yeah, so sometimes with our clients, it's that guilt. It's that guilt, right? It's that never having enough quality time. So it's that guilt aspect. I don't know, Alexis, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes. Oh my God, so many thoughts. So, so I feel like this is huge, right? And people come to me all the time and they're like, I just need to get all the stuff done. And I think, you know, what I tell people is, look, you're never going to get all the stuff done. We're going to die someday with a big long list of things we didn't do. And that is okay. That is part of life. And in fact, that's preferable. Like, I don't want to live a life where I get done everything every day, because what am I striving for? Like, what do I have to look forward to? What I think is really important is that we're able to prioritize in such a way that we can say, the things I did today were more important than the things I didn't do. And a huge part of that, just like David Allen says, is that we need to get everything out of our brains and out of all these other systems into one place, so that we can look at what we have to do and make actual prioritization decisions that we can defend to ourselves later, right? Because if we can do that, then we don't have to worry about the fact that we're not getting into everything, because like, that's not real life. We're, am I going to visit all the countries I want to? No. Am I going to get my giant to-do list for my business done? No. Like, we live in the real world. We can't make more time, but we can make concerted decisions about our time. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how so I just start off by telling people they're going to die, basically.
It's a good start. Alexis, I am thrilled that you took the hour to spend with us today. And this is an example of where we want to go with our communities of practice. This is my dream becoming real. And so thank you for contributing to that dream. We have 3 more sessions coming up this year. On November 6th, we're going to talk about beyond active listening. So we've all been to too many active listening classes, but this is going to be focused on Kate Murphy's book, You're Not Listening, and a book called Just Listen. And then we have a former colleague of mine coming to speak on November 20th, on gratitude. And then our own faculty member, Zelda Berger, will be talking about meaning making and coaching and how to integrate that into your coaching on December 4th. So anybody, if you recognize what we're doing is we're integrating outside speakers with faculty. So please stay with us. If you have a topic that you want us to discuss, we'll put it together. After the call today, we would so join our LinkedIn group. So go to Global IOC for the LinkedIn group information. Go to our website, globalioc.com. We've got more information in the blog. We're building out the communities of practice. We're building out thought leadership, and we'll continue to have events. So keep with us. I'm so excited that you could join us today, and I can't thank you enough, Alexis. It was so amazing. What an awesome presentation, which will be posted on our website as soon as I can get it over to our virtual assistant. In the meantime, everybody have an awesome weekend, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, if not before. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.